My year of rest and relaxation is quite the journey, which is ironic because not a lot really happens in it. Pretty recently, I read Lapvona, which at the time of recording is Ottessa Moshfegh's newest book, and I absolutely adored it as a grim and bleak medieval pseudo-fantasy novel. But My Year of Rest and Relaxation is her most celebrated and famous work, and I finally read it. I also got this really nice vintage copy. I think I'm just going to say up front that I'm not entirely sure what the message, the moral, the point of this novel is. If you have one, if you came to a kind of conclusion over what this book is about, please let me know in the comments. I'm going to talk about how it impacted me, but not necessarily what I think it was trying to do. I think that's a curious thing about Ottessa Moshfegh, and I've gone back and forth on her as an author based on things that I've read, comments from other people, and how I've reacted to her books. Generally, I think she's an absolutely wonderful author, but there are also things I've read that have kind of annoyed me about her, and that's going to happen all the time with authors. But this is a novel that left a wonderful impact on me. It tells the story of a young woman who's a graduate from Columbia, her parents are both dead, and with her inheritance, she's got herself a very, very nice apartment on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. She has a very privileged situation as things stand right now. She's in her late 20s, she had a good job that she left, and she has plenty of money to sustain herself. But she has decided on this hibernation plan. Her year of rest and relaxation is very literal. She plans to put herself into a kind of drug-addled coma and hibernate. And when that year is done, she will feel rested and reborn. We learn throughout the novel about her relationship to her parents while they were alive. We learn about how her parents died. We learn about her relationship to her psychiatrist and her best friend Reva. In terms of the present day, flashbacks aside, this book is set in the year 2000, and you only really get three characters: the protagonist, the best friend Reva, and the psychiatrist Dr. Tuttle, who is, for lack of a better word, mad. Our protagonist, who I think I'm now realizing is nameless, and I don't think that occurred to me before. If she isn't, I don't remember a name. Curious. I usually notice stuff like that. She picked Dr. Tuttle out of a phone book. She called up a bunch of psychiatrists at about 11 p.m, and Dr. Tuttle was the only one who picked up the phone. And so she's the one that our protagonist goes with. But Dr. Tuttle is insane. Dr. Tuttle creates a recipe, a cocktail of drugs for our protagonist to take. The book lists more than once reams and reams of drug names: antidepressants, sleeping pills, anxiety medication, tranquilizers, things that I'm not that familiar with. And I think that that's part of what the book is getting at, is the American obsession with medication. As a British person, there are a lot of American medications that I'm unfamiliar with for two reasons. One, they have a different name. Two, in the US, drugs are prescribed far more liberally, far more readily, and in dangerous amounts. And I think that's one of the things that we're getting at here. Now, I am a person with anxiety and depression. I am currently on an antidepressant, and it has saved my life. I take 20 milligrams of citalopram every morning, and I'm alive because of it. And so antidepressants save lives. I am evidence of that. I am literally happy all of the time because of that drug. But this is different. This is a book about a cocktail of drugs that numb this person, that make her something else and someone else, that she is using as a plan to hibernate. But the book isn't just about her falling asleep and waking up a year later. A lot happens. There's a lot of calls with her therapist. There are a lot of plans that she makes. She has this routine of going downstairs and talking to these Egyptian guys that run a bodega, and she gets cheap, nasty coffee from them. Working class coffee, as she calls it, where she will not be questioned, where she will not have to get into too much of a conversation with people, where she doesn't have to go to some fancy coffee shop. And we spend a lot of time with her and Reva having conversations about love, about exes, about films. Our protagonist is obsessed with film and TV. She constantly sits and just watches television, watches films. She has an encyclopedic memory and knowledge bank when it comes to specific films from the 80s and 90s. That's another thing that I quite like about the book. The fact that it's set in 2000 means that it can be full of pop culture references without feeling cringe. When literature is written now and references things going on now, especially in pop culture, films, TV shows, singers, actors, these things age badly and become very cringe very quickly. But you can do it if you set your book just a little bit in the past. When it's set in 2000 and you get references to things like a Walkman or films that were popular in the 90s, blockbusters, it works because it's already happened, it's solidified. And the same goes for books that you read that are set in the 70s, 60s, 50s, whatever. These things have already happened, and these pop culture references come off as nostalgic or simply factual, rather than guessing at what is cool right now and seeing if it ages badly, which it usually does. It's a fascinating exploration of how a person can live their life. Our protagonist is very privileged. She has everything that she needs. She is miserable. She is traumatized by her parents, by her ex-boyfriend, who we learn more and more about as the book goes on, and he was a real piece of work. He really objectified and sexualized her in a very disturbing way. In that way, it's a very feminist book. It looks at the traumas that a person has been subjected to. The traumas that parents and families cause, the traumas that boyfriends cause, the traumas that best friends can cause, the way that people are abused physically, emotionally, mentally, gaslit, lied to, etc. And we have a person here who is the physical result of all of that. I also, though, found this book weirdly comforting. I don't really know how to explain this. I'm a workaholic. I wasn't when I was a teacher, because I hated teaching, and I would try to do as little work as possible when I was teaching. As soon as I went self-employed, freelancing, working for myself, writing, making videos, I suddenly found that I couldn't stop. I wanted to work all of the time, and I'm so guilty when I don't. If I pick up my Switch to play a video game, if I turn on the TV, I sit there and I think to myself, well, you could be working right now, even if that work is just reading a book that you could then make an article or a video about. I'm a workaholic. This book gave me some comfort, though, because it kind of shows that there's no right or wrong way to live a life. Our protagonist is a person that has been traumatized, as so many of us have, by various people and various events, and she is now choosing to live this hibernation life. There was something sort of hedonistic, something cathartic about her relationship to herself, about her plans, about her throwing life away in spite of her privilege, in spite of her comfort. She is willing to just throw a year away, maybe even throw her entire life away. There was something very cathartic about that. Something that I felt that I was romanticizing. Whether that's a good or a bad thing or not, I have no idea. Maybe there's something very toxic about me in the fact that I did that. But I found her pleasurable as a character. It made me feel less guilty for the time that I sometimes waste when I'm just staring at my phone. I felt excused by her. I felt that that was a very strange reaction. When I realized I was reacting that way to this, I thought that that was odd, but it happened nonetheless. But aside from all of that, aside from my reaction to it and what I think that the book was trying to get at, and again, I'm not confident in anything I'm saying, honestly, because this is a very strange book. What I liked most about it was the way that it was written and the way that it reads. This is a very simple book. It is almost exactly 300 pages, and I tore through it in a day and a half. I found it effortless. Recently, with my ADHD, I've been really struggling to get through a lot of books, even books that I've really enjoyed, even books that I've found tantalizing and gripping. The language in this book, rather than what it's about, its themes, its characters, its events, any of that, just the way that it's written in a very simplistic, stripped down way, had me just tearing through it, had me focusing all of my attention page after page after page. There are so many simple and compound sentences in here that just skate across the paper. Ottessa Moshfegh has a wonderful way with words, where she combines hard-hitting emotional impacts with very simple delivery, flow, and word choices. She really is a wordsmith in the simplest way possible. George Orwell once said something along the lines of, "Never use a complex word if a simple word will do." And Ottessa Moshfegh is certainly a great example of that. Her writing is simplistic, but there is so much beauty, poetry, theme, morality, and big ideas going on within that simple language, because simple language can express so much to so many people. The more complex your language, the more you alienate your readers. And Moshfegh is creating a book that everyone can understand and therefore empathize with, even if the character seems odd. Even if the psychiatrist is a psychopath who is perhaps killing her patient. And I don't think I've actually spent enough time talking about her. Dr. Tuttle, the psychiatrist, is the most interesting character in here. There is a running theme of disease and death in this book. Our protagonist's parents died. Her father died of cancer, and her mother killed herself shortly afterwards. Her best friend Reva's mother has cancer and is dying. Cancer, which is a thing I am deeply afraid of, is something that runs all the way through this book. But it's not just cancer, it's death and disease in general. And our protagonist tells her psychiatrist, I think 6 times throughout the course of the book, that her parents are dead. Dr. Tuttle never remembers this. Now, as a psychiatrist, there are specific things that you need to remember about your patients. And the death of their parents, the fact that they are now an orphan, is going to be the biggest thing, arguably. But that's the point. That's why that's the thing that Dr. Tuttle doesn't remember, to showcase just how mad she is. Dr. Tuttle uses a lot of pseudoscience, a lot of talk of herbal remedies, talk of weird methods that might help a person unwind, detach, detox, whatever, while throwing prescription medications into the mouth of her patient, which her patient then takes advantage of by getting repeat prescriptions without the doctor knowing. Dr. Tuttle shows a very grand lack of care for her patients. And if you're digging into themes and ideas and what the book is about, it's partly about the systemic medical institution and how detached from humanity it is. The fact that drugs are just thrown at people, the fact that doctors often don't care about their patients, possibly because they are overworked, possibly because they are human and they have been conditioned by a monetary system. Moshfegh can be talking about any number of things here. And that's what I find very interesting about this book, is there are a lot of themes and ideas and morals to take away from this, but none of them are too specific. They're vague in a really fun way, in a kind of tantalizing way. What do you think this book is about? What do you get from it? It feels very open-ended. I feel like this would be a really good book to study for your A-levels or at university, because it's very difficult to come away with a very specific message. And that's great, because reading literature like this isn't always about understanding the author's intent, but simply thinking critically and looking at what you're taking away and why. It's about you, not her. And I really appreciate that. I enjoyed this book, I found it cathartic, and I found my own catharsis took me by surprise. I am an absolute fan of Ottessa Moshfegh now. I'm going to read more of her works. People keep recommending Eileen, her first novel. I will read that soon. And I can't wait to see what she does next, especially after Lapvona. Subscribe for books.